Welcome to the Business of Thinking podcast. This is the place for high achievers who want more than motivation. They want mastery. Here we skip the surface level talk and go straight into the psychology of high performance.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Thinking. My name is Richard Reid. Today I'm really excited to be joined by Jez Rose, and Jez wears many hats, as he will no doubt tell us in due course. He is a presenter, an author, a public speaker, and he's also a ceramic artist, and believe it or not, the first person to be accredited for having a zero carbon net honey farm. Is that right, Jez?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what that means that you've just said. So just in case it's not exactly that, it was the first certified carbon neutral honey farm.
Okay, we'll take that. Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about that before we go any further, because that is really interesting and very different to some of the other things that you do on the face of it.
Yeah, sure. And it was an accident. So I accidentally bought a farm. The first intention was to create a reindeer farm. Because I've discovered that a lot of people that keep horses naively and probably with good intention buy reindeer thinking, oh, we could rent those out at Christmas and it's a bit like a horse. And then they find out that they have very specific, unique needs to care for reindeer.
Okay.
And so they sell them. And then they're herd mammals. They're not really meant to be on their own. Because I studied animal behavior and reindeer was my exotic of choice. So I thought, I can bring all these reindeers together and make a farm. Anyway, for various different reasons, we went the environmental route with the farm. I thought I've got a wonderful opportunity here to show other people how to care for the environment. Environment equals wildflowers, wildflowers equals bees. A friend of mine's dad was a honey farmer. And so I had them deliver a beehive. And within about 12 hours, I thought, this isn't enough. Maybe we should get 2 beehives. So then I had another one. And then the next thing you know, I'm studying with Cornell University to become a master beekeeper. I'm 100% all in. We've got 184 hives across 3 apiaries. First people to put honeybees back onto the Burley estate in Lincolnshire in over 100 years. And I thought, well, let's go all in. What if we went carbon neutral? And then we became certified organic with the Soil Association. I was on the board of the Soil Association for a little while. And I realized that actually, and it's relevant to all of everything you're going to talk to me about today, is absolutely relevant, because the golden thread is to do the right thing is much more difficult. And it's much more difficult environmentally to do the right thing. It's easier to pollute the planet and not be environmentally friendly. And actually, when it comes to leadership and high performance, particularly in sustaining high performance, which is where my sort of specialism and most interest is, it is much more difficult to do the right thing. And inherently, we're lazy as human beings. So more often than not, we don't do the right thing. Not through malice, not through intentional choice to, be worse. It's just a bit more difficult. So yeah, that's how the honey farm came about in a brief nutshell.
Fantastic, and I love the way you go all in. Fantastic. It says a lot about your energy.
Sure, but it says it's not everybody picks up on that. What it's about, Richard, is we only get this once. I've had a lot of death in my life.
Okay.
And I've been informed a lot by the notion that we all know we only get this once. Every day is, here. We're not guaranteed the next day. There's no bookie that will give you odds for waking up tomorrow morning. But for a short period of time, I was also in the ambulance service training to be a critical care paramedic. And I saw firsthand what that's like. There were a lot of people that didn't wake up this morning. We did. And so what are you going to do today with that? And some people sort of say, it's a bit of a cliche and it's a bit flippant. Just yesterday, I read in the news, 5 young people go off 8:30 at night, go out for a night out, all 5 of them die in a car accident. We don't have any more time. So if you're not all in, you have to sort of ask why not.
Love it. Absolutely love it. We'll go into that in more detail in a moment. Just rewinding a little bit, talk us a little bit through a potted history of your life. I mean, there's already some polished baubles in what you've already said, but let's go back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you've got to where you are today.
Grew up in the countryside. So that's always informed. I was very fortunate to have a family that enjoyed the countryside and lived relatively rurally, but we ended up moving quite rurally, actually. so that's, I think, always informed my love of nature
Mm.
and the what nature provides in terms of its solace and escape and peace. Discovered Buddhism when I was about 15, and that's been a huge part of my life for pretty much all of my life, and I've come back to it several times.
Mm.
That informs a lot in terms of the ability to press pause and reflection, and less an understanding that we have enough rather than adding all the time. There's
Yeah.
huge power in taking and pressing pause and removing. Um, and so the big sort of pivotal moment is that a friend of mine, relevant to today, a friend of mine's dad was head of Lloyd's Bank, or certainly board level at Lloyd's Bank.
Mm. Mm.
And I had been out working with Disney, teaching customer service and leadership. And he said, "Why don't we get you in? Because we spend a fortune sending our guys over to Disney to learn this stuff. Why don't we get you in and pay you a lot less?" So I said, "Why don't you get me in and pay me a little bit less? And and if it works, then maybe I'll do that for a bit." Uh, and it worked. They enjoyed it. His friend worked with Microsoft. He recommended me to somebody there. And then I started really as a sort of pseudo speaker trainer. It wasn't, I didn't know either of those
Mm.
things
Mm.
existed. I just did it. And that eventually morphed into becoming a speaker. And for 22 years now, I've some very, very lovely accolades and kind things that have been said about that career, which has been a huge part of my life really forever. I've done
Yeah.
that a lot. I worked as a professional magician for 15 years.
Of course you
So
did.
standing up, yeah, of course I did. So standing up in front of people and holding their attention is something I do very naturally, and I'm okay with that. I did kids TV as a kids TV presenter. I started that in 2003, did that for about 7 years, something like that. Came out of TV, went back into mainstream TV just before lockdown on Saturday morning TV shows.
Yeah.
So that bit has always been there. So I wrote a book in 2005, I think. The first version of that was called Have a Crap Day, and it was about the psychology of service excellence. So there were plenty of books about customer service, but I was more interested in what's the kind of psychology, what's the sort of
Yeah.
positioning behind that? How do we get there? And then in 2015, I wrote a book called Flip the Switch. That became a #1 bestseller, and that really did transform my speaking career because obviously, a lot more people read it, a lot more people want to hear about it. So that's, I guess, a potted history as to how I get here,
Yeah.
with quite a bit left out, but still enough of random stuff left in.
Even in that, there's an awful lot to unpack, isn't there? But it sounds as though, going back to what you were saying before, there's a common thread between these things in terms of how they bring out aspects of your personality, but also in terms of the philosophy that lies beneath them. Do you want to say a little bit
Mm.
more about that?
Yeah, that's very true. I guess so. And for whether or not it's a good thing, for better or not, those influences through people dying that I was very close to, and seeing a lot of that has made a big difference to how I work and how I think and what I reflect on, and whether or not I'm willing to say and talk about those things as well, because I will quite happily go places that other people are a bit worried about
Mm.
exploring. I mean, even in the book in Flip the Switch, there's a calculation at the end of it which will help you very broadly, based on rough averages of our lifespans, calculate how many months you've got left to live.
It could be quite
And
sobering.
I've had a lot of people that have pushed back on that and said, it's a bit macabre and I don't want to know. And I just think it's a really naive way to look at it. If you think about knowing how many summers you've got left, really puts your life into perspective,
Yeah.
Richard. Because you're not going to ever run away from it. And it's very much a white Western thing. Other areas of the world and other cultures have very different relationships with death. But
Yes.
we absolutely have very much British things as well. It's very much past the salt. I love
Very
that
sanitized and in the background.
it
Isn't
is,
Yeah.
yes. We don't want to talk about it. And look, it got us through the war. It was a great mentality, but by God, we need to shift away from that whole, keep calm and carry on thing. It's nonsense. It's killing people. I love how Victoria Wood, in one of her sketches, when she was talking about a funeral pyre, She was saying, that in some people in the world, somebody dies, they throw them on the funeral pyre and they celebrate. In this country, it's 72 baps, Connie. I'll slice you spread, and that's the sort of summary of what
Yeah.
death is for us. So,
Yeah.
so that has formed a lot, but also so has crisis. So has I've been through a lot. I've had to reinvent a lot. I've had to lose a lot. I've had to move away a lot. Um, I moved to America. It was utterly disastrous. I lost a lot. But in that, you get the opportunity to press pause. And what I realized, Richard, is just how powerful that notion is, because most people don't think they've got the time or the opportunity to press pause, because you've got to carry on working to pay the mortgage. You've got demands at work. You haven't got any free time. You've got to juggle being a parent. You've got to juggle being a spouse or a partner or a husband or a mother or whatever. So I, sort of facing a fairly bleak period, realized actually I've got an opportunity here that we never get, and that's to press pause, draw a thick line, turn the page, completely blank new page. If you got the opportunity to start again, and that's part of the human condition.
Mm.
There's not a single one of us that hasn't ever thought, "God, wouldn't it be lovely to run away and live in a cabin in the woods?" Or "Wouldn't it be great if life was just less stressful and I don't have to worry about all of this?" Or, well, I had that opportunity. So with a blank page, you get rid of everything. You tip all the toys out the toy box, and one by one decide what goes back in.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
incredible what you leave out.
Yeah.
So that isn't something that just stays with me. My job, I believe, part of my job, my role, my being here, is to work out how do I transform that into a system or a model or a process that other people can do without having to lose everything, without having to press pause, without having to stop, without having to go through trauma or crisis.
Yeah.
What are the lessons we can pull from that and apply both at home and at work, whether you're, leadership, sales, wherever you are, and wherever you are in the transition of change your life as well. And I think there's a very fine line between knowing you're good at something and confidence. Arrogance and confidence
Yeah.
is a difficult line to tread.
Yeah.
But I think that's where one of my strengths is taking things that are broadly quite complicated and simplifying them so that they're a bit easier to do.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'd love to go into that in just a moment. But some of what you're saying there, I almost sort of get the sense that's where a lot of people were when we had the enforced lockdowns during COVID. And I
Mm,
think part of the tragedy of that, aside from the deaths and the illness, seems to be a lot of people have lost sight of those reflections that they had
yeah,
during that
yeah,
period, and they've gone straight back
yeah.
into the washing machine.
Yeah, because it's the easy route. It comes back to exactly what I said at the beginning. We're lazy. We don't like to think we are, but we are. And so the easy route is, the path well trodden. We are creatures of habit. Everything is behavioral, and all behaviors are shaped by consequences and very quickly become habits. So it was all those people in lockdown that loved baking and found out they
Yeah,
had, a great love for gardening, and then as soon as the knock on the door and security and the job came back, say, okay, come back into the office now.
yeah,
And they abandoned it.
yeah,
Now, since I announced that I was sort of quote unquote walking away from my career, which isn't quite how it's happened, but for broad forgetting the nuance of it, walking away from my career and starting again as a ceramic artist. In the last 22 years, I have never had so many people get in touch with me, either on comments or personal messages or emails, to say, "You're living my dream. I wish I could do something like that," or "This sounds such an amazing journey." The idea of escaping the rat race to do something else, right? And it's so hard to, when people say, "How did you do that?" Or, "How do I do something?" Or, "I wish I could do that." It's really hard to sort of explain to people, but you can.
I think that's some of the
There's
sadness of it, isn't it? That people think that's not them. It's not available for
Yeah,
them.
sure. Yeah. I mean, it's joyful for me because there's a new book in it. I have a new book coming out
Yeah,
next year, which is because I don't want people to have to go through trauma or crisis to get to the point that
yeah,
I got to. I want to work out, okay, how do you work out what life changes and big significant changes? How can we navigate those and influence them and shape them for our benefit so that they work for us? The book I just wrote, Leading Change, that has a lot of that starting of that mentality. It's interesting. I had to reread it recently for something. And I was thinking, gosh, these are the seed. I was already there. I was already starting to think about that, the seeds of these ideas of thinking differently. and getting back to the sort of more human element. It's why, we talk about high performance. I'm treading all over your podcast plan. I'm so sorry.
No, this is fascinating. Go for it.
One of the challenges with high performance, I've probably been working in high performance for the best part of 10 years, really solidly for 8 years. And what's interesting is almost every client will say to me, we're a high performing team, or we want to shape to become a high performance team, or we're looking at high performance. If you ask 6 of them, we had at one point 5 clients that we were onboarding to work with high performance.
Yeah.
And I asked each of them, what does high performance mean for you? 3 of them didn't know.
Yeah.
They said, that's a really good question. We'll kind of, shape that and we'll get back to you. And the other 2 that could define it had completely different examples of what they thought high performance was.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, it is a bit of a catch-all term. But here's the rub. In the last 8 months, I've noticed a pattern, a trend. I keep notebooks I've got 19 of them. I've kept them for every single year. I keep a notebook, and that notebook is full of client calls and notes and everything I need to know from a client call about an event or a conference or whatever. And so I go through them every year to see what the themes are. And over the last 8 months or so, the real tragedy is that almost all of them have said, we're doing really well. Our team's just absolutely knackered. They're so tired. We've really been pushing for more. We just need to push them to just a little bit more. We just need, a bit more. And I think, when do we stop?
Yeah, sustainability or lack of sustainability comes to mind when you describe that.
Exactly that, yeah. Like when they break, and then of course, really, you don't care that much because, well, there's a HR department for that, and you just find somebody new.
Yeah.
So what is this about? And the problem is, high performance isn't the conversation we should be having, because once you reach high performance, as all genuine high performing teams know, whether they're Olympic or sport or corporate commerce, it's the sustaining of high performance. That's the sweet spot. That's the secret sauce. How do we sustain high performance? And unfortunately, it all comes down to values. Because if you've got a group of people that love what they're doing and want to do it and are empowered to do what they love doing, they will perform at no other level than high performance. But we look at just how do we buy high performance rather than how do we fix our culture.
Yeah. And part of getting people to perform at that level for a sustained period, I'm guessing some of that is about knowing the individuals, knowing what makes them tick, and having some collective focus as well. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Well, one of the greatest tragedies, I think, of my work with leaders is, a number of things that really sort of come to mind. But the one that I always come to, and I share this with them when I work with them, is I have asked every leader that I've ever worked with, every group of leaders, how many of you know what it is that drives the people in your team? What is it that motivates or reinforces their behavior? And this came from it was a long time ago now, it might have been 13 years ago or so. I was at a conference speaking, and I watched the awards ceremony. And at this awards ceremony, this lady was awarded Customer Service of the Year or something like that. And this massive hamper, it took 2 people to carry this hamper out full of chocolate. It was huge. They carried it out and they announced the winner, and she could not look more miserable. I mean, so annoyed. And I thought, she's got a story to tell. I'm going to go and find that lady and find out why on earth she looks so damn miserable, right? She's just won basically a lifetime supply of chocolate. It weighs about the amount of a 10-year-old. So I seek her out at the end, and she'd obviously seen me speak. And I said, if you don't mind me saying, you don't look especially happy about winning this award. She said, I'm delighted for the award. She said, but I've been working with this company for 11 years and I'm diabetic and they know it. Now, the point there is that award was just a catch-all award, right? And too much leadership is just catch-all leadership. It's a bottle of champagne for the winner, or £100 cash for the person. And time again, clients will say, we've tried everything and they just won't do anything differently. And if you've got people on your team, you should have a list of those people on your team by name, and next to those name, what is it that reinforces them? I don't drink alcohol, so if you say to me, Jez, great job, here's a bottle of champagne, it's not going to want me. I don't want to make you do any more. So, for Sharon, it might be the cash. For Asif, it might be a day off so he can go and pick up his kids early from school. But those reinforcements will change as well. So That's kind of the nub of it, Richard, is that, it's really low hanging fruit that we're missing. And I don't know who to blame. I created this leadership course last year because I thought, well, maybe I can help fix some of that naively. But what I realized very quickly was actually it's not really that easily fixable, because it comes down to a lot more than just mindset. Or, when I ask leaders, how many of you have had leadership training for what you do? And they all put their hands up. And I say, how many of you got a manual or some sort of workbook? And they all put their hands up. And they say, okay, keep your hands up if you read all of that manual and workbook. And most of them put their hands down. And then I say, well, how many of you just kind of put your hands up if you also have on your shelves at home or at work some other leadership book, maybe Who Moved My Cheese or 5 Minute Manager? And over 80% of them put their hand up. And I say, okay, so what that shows me is that you don't have all the answers. And your leadership training wasn't enough because you're still seeking knowledge on how to be a good leader, right? So I realized, actually, yes, there's a problem in developing leaders, because I think we've massively missed the mark. We get so caught up in utter nonsense like personality profiling, which no psychologist worth their endorse. I'm very outspoken about personality profiling. But then at the other end, we don't give leaders the nurturing and the tools that they need, because we hoodwink them and think it's more complicated than it is. Leadership is just getting other people to want to do something differently.
Yeah.
Leadership is way more psychology and behavioral science than it is, quote unquote, leadership.
Totally
Sorry,
agree.
I've got off on a tangent now.
No,
you started me.
No, this is great. It's music to my ears. I fully agree. I think that the risk is we objectify people, don't we? We assume everybody has the same motivations, and we lose sight of who they are. And it always astounds me how many managers don't have regular conversations with their people. It's only when they have an appraisal, and they make assumptions about people.
Sure.
And systems don't promote that as an activity because it's not one of the things that you're measured on.
Sure.
I
think one of the most powerful things leaders can do is to talk with their people more. And there'll be people listening to this rolling their eyes thinking, what on earth is that kind of? But here's the reality of that. Most organizations I work with still have annual appraisals. Well, what the hell's an annual appraisal? It's 12 months or 11 months worth of stuff bundled into one meeting.
Yeah.
It's no wonder you don't have time for it anymore. Yeah. Well, if a quarterly or monthly appraisal, and when you tell people to do a quarterly or monthly appraisal, they all fold their arms, sit back and go, well, we haven't got time for that. We haven't got time for it because what you think it is your annual appraisal, which is 11 months of nonsense.
Yeah.
You realize very quickly that within a month or two, or at least a quarter, monthly check-ins are literally just that. Everything all right? Yeah, great, brilliant, done.
Yeah, because everyone's more aligned, you know what's expected.
Exactly that, yeah. So there's a lot of, it's just weird. I find it very odd that I kind of naively thought maybe starting work in leadership properly, maybe, I don't know, maybe that was 10 years ago, something like that. I have a terrible concept of time because I do so much. But I thought, this would be great. I could sort of help and make a dent and maybe nudge us all forwards. But I don't think we're any further forward. We're still making the same massive mistakes. And now, of course, they're just machines that churn out people. And the real winners, the real genuine high performers, are those that don't expect the quick fixes and know that actually there's huge value in pressing pause or reset. And I always say, if you've only got one thing you can do, you've got no budget, you just want to get some people in a room, you have to start with your values, because most values are utter nonsense. You can't live values you can't name. I'll tell you this, the one question I ask every single audience, have done for years now, I would have asked hundreds of thousands of people this all over the world. I ask them to put their hands up if their organization has values, or some people call them pillars or whatever. And they all put their hands up. And I say, okay, keep your hands up if you know them off by heart. And it's less than 1% that put their hands up. So immediately they're pointless. They're just a marketing trope. Then they're utter nonsense.
Exactly.
None of you can live those values if you don't know what they are. And what kind of a value is trust and honesty? What does that mean when you're typing an email? You've got to give it a behavior in order to know what it means.
Yeah, absolutely. People are going to be held accountable for purporting those
exactly
as well and acting them out.
Yeah.
And I think there's often that gap, isn't it, between what's on the website and what's
Oh
being
yeah, huge.
approved
Yeah.
in everyday behaviours.
And the amount of times I've worked with an organization on a culture piece or values piece, and they're very excited because the last time they addressed them was 10 years ago when we had our big rebrand. I'm like, who
Yeah,
has values that stay the same for 10 years when you're employing 100 plus people?
yeah,
You only have to have 10 people that change and that dynamic alters.
yeah,
You should be addressing your values every, I don't know, maybe 6 months,
yeah,
even if it's just to say, do these still, yep, they do. Great. Are we
yeah,
all okay with, no, we need a little bit of work on that one. Great. Let's just make sure we know what that means. Brilliant. Has the business changed in the last 6 months? What does that value mean for this part of the business now? But it doesn't happen because we just plow on all the time. We don't pause. We don't rest, and we don't give ourselves enough time to make a difference.
yeah, yeah. And you've mentioned that idea of pausing a few times now. I'm a big proponent of that, and I don't think there's enough self-reflection in business. It's all about
Yeah,
getting
agreed.
things out at the door. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how people at home might be able to apply this to their everyday experience?
Oh gosh, this is controversial too.
Go for
Um, well, look,
it.
it's because I've done it, right?
Yeah.
I've lived this. There are two things that will make a massive difference to your life. One is I had something called a seasonal change model for a while that I was working on.
Okay.
Um, and several organizations use that. What it basically models is that we have to navigate change through 4 phases that mirror the seasons here, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. So all change starts with a period of autumn, repair and regeneration,
Mhm.
harvesting. It then moves into a period of winter where it feels like nothing's happening. Feels like you just sort of press pause on life. Doesn't seem like anything's going anywhere. You can't see
Yep.
anything developing. But actually, in the background, behind the scenes, there's a ton of work going on. You just can't see it, right? That's what's happening in winter. And then, of course, you move into spring, new growth, new life. We get suddenly all of the work that was happening that we started doing in autumn through winter. We start to see the beginnings of that change, and then into summer, which a lot of people feel is a period of sort of eternal abundance. And then we're back into autumn again because nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
And the joy of that model is that wherever you are, you can identify. You can say, "Oh yeah, I'm in my personal summer now," or "I'm in my winter." Because then you know what's coming next. It sort of gives you opportunity and hope and inspiration, but also means you can do things actively to expedite that process a little.
Yeah.
So I had that. Um, and I realized that this ability to get rid of stuff, the repair and regeneration, the harvesting, I often liken it to roses. So at the farm, I had this big rose walkway. We had, I don't know what it was, 40 different roses or something like that. And there's this weird thing that happens with roses is that you cut them right back to like 8 inches off the ground. Doesn't matter how gorgeous it is, you cut it right back to
Yeah.
nothing. And it's so dramatic and horrific. But then the next year it blossoms so much better because all of the energy of the plant goes into its roots over the winter rather than
Yeah.
into the leaves and the buds that are going to die. So you end up with a total abundance. Anyway, this is that opportunity that we have at any given time to cut back. And it begins with stuff, begins with physical objects. And this is hugely influenced by Buddhism, but it is not wholly a Buddhist practice. The Buddhist practice is you have enough, the concept that we have enough, just as you are on your own. You have enough. The idea that every step you take, you can be home. So if you take that to its extreme, you get rid of everything. And just as I did, start with a blank page, what do you add back in? And it's a bit Marie Kondo, I suppose. I love there's like a William Morris quote that I'm going to butcher, which basically is, only have things that are useful or that you love or something like that. And so you just go through everything and you pick it up and you say, do I need this or do I desperately love it? And if it's neither of those things, you lose it. And if you're any good at eBay, you find out, I've made a couple of grand. And this is incredible, right? But also you get great mental clarity and freedom. There's also a lot less to clean. Your house will become a lot easier to dust, I promise. So that's sort of the first thing, which is quite radical, but I've done it. I had a book collection of over 3,000 books, and some of the old videos, you'll have seen it at the farm. I got rid of absolutely everything. One of the interesting things that happened with that, and I may be a slightly extreme example, but I guarantee there'll be examples in your own life that are similar. When I unpacked them, I realized that I had over 200 books that were unread on those shelves because I kept being gifted or buying books. Oh, be great, I'll read that, and never got round to it. Some of those books, I'm looking at them now, are from 2016 when they first came out, and they've never been read since. So I'm on a mission to read.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It does tell you something because
Yeah.
we are consumers. We get distracted, and it's all honest. It's all, we're just living life, but we're not living life consciously. And that's a great example of how we're not living life consciously.
Yeah.
If you wake up in the morning, you've got somebody that loves you and you've got food in your tummy and a roof over your head, you've got enough. And how much you keep adding that up. I was building a business of nearly £1 million, and I nearly lost it all. And when I say nearly lost it, I did lose it all nearly. Like, I literally lost almost everything. And you realize when you've got nothing, just what really matters. And none of that nonsense really matters. You don't need 7 watches. You only need 1 watch. And if you've got a phone, technically, I suppose you could argue you don't need another watch. Anyway, so that's the sort of principle, right?
Yeah.
And push it how far you want. And then the other sort of thing to consider, I suppose, is the cutting away of other dead wood, which is people and influence. And I would strongly recommend you unfollow the people on Instagram and TikTok that are the models and the fitness instructors and the superstars, and start to follow artists, maybe musicians, people that give you cultural richness rather than force you to compare your body to somebody else's or compare a level of success to somebody else's. I'd also go as far as saying I'd unfollow all of the competitors in your industry as well. Just focus on what you do really well, and you will do it honestly and authentically really well. But it's having the trust to do that. It's a big leap of faith for us to have.
I was just going to say that it's letting go of what you know, isn't it? In some respects,
letting go is very hard. There is a beautiful quote. I'm going to find it. Give me 20 seconds because I'll be able to find it in here. I don't want to butcher this. It is such a beautiful quote. It's an ancient. I keep like a big, because I write this weekly email that goes out to tons of people, and I keep. I always add a quote in, so I keep this big bank of quotes. And it's by a Japanese, I think, philosopher, Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu. To hold, you must first open your hand, let go. And there's this lovely idea that, of course, as long as we're closed, we can't hold anything because you have to let go first. But we're not very good at letting go. There's a lot of people listening to this that won't be in very happy relationships, that they know deep down inside they're not where they need to be, or they're with the wrong person, or they're in the wrong job. It's a huge amount of trust and power to let go.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge for people, isn't it? That often it's the comfort of knowing what you get, even if there's a sense there could be something better out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just, I suppose, the comfort; it's the reinvention that comes with that. I just wrote a new keynote. I walked away from keynote presenting for about 6 months and had more inquiries in 6 months than when I said that I was leaving than I had in about sort of 4 years, I think. So I wrote a new keynote.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly that. Yeah, yes. It's about a closed sign up for a suspended period of time. You find all your customers rush to you. And the new keynote is called The Art of Reinvention, and this reset principle comes from that. It's a really interesting place to be when you think, what is it that I can change? I don't think it is attributed to him, but it's often misattributed to some guy. And the quote is, it doesn't matter because it's not, he didn't say it. So I suppose I don't know why I'm worried about getting it right. It's this notion that you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And people say C.S. Lewis said it, but he didn't. At any given time, it's never too late to start again. And I think that notion that you have permission to start again, you don't have to wait for anything, and it's not time conditional or time critical, it's incredibly powerful, but very freeing, both in commerce and in our private lives as well. But I get it. It takes a bit of trust. It took me 8 months, I think, of worrying and constant thinking about it, to have the confidence to press pause and then press reset. And actually, some of my colleagues were saying, I think you've been in this space for about 2 years because you've sort of pivoted and tweaked and not quite found it. And it
Mm-hmm.
took just stopping completely. And so it's a technique I always advise leaders to do is, when something goes wrong, just stop. You've got time. Just
Yes.
unless you're a heart surgeon and you're mid-operation, probably just make a decision and run with it, right? But unless you've got a good anaesthetist, in which case, stop.
Stop.
Yeah, just stop and pause and reevaluate. There's a clinical tool or model process where every time something changes, you stop, you go back to the beginning, and you go through everything all over again. So every intervention you make to somebody in emergency medicine, you go back to the beginning: airway, breathing, circulation, bleeding, yada yada yada. There's a whole, glucose, yada yada. And every time something changes, you go back to the beginning and say, okay, let's just reevaluate everything.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. We just fix, 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 fix.
Yeah.
And the best leaders are the ones that pause. You've got 30 seconds. If something's going to go wrong in 30 seconds, you aren't going to change it, whether you act now or in 12 seconds, right? So you've got 30 seconds to just stop and say, okay, hang on a minute. What do we need to do? And the best leaders ask that question out loud to those in their charge.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sends that very clear message to other people, doesn't it, about what's possible as well. If you've got somebody at the top who's taking that approach. But so often you see these knee-jerk reactions to situations that often just compounds the existing problems.
Yes, yeah. Most leaders are suffering with imposter syndrome. Most leaders have a lack of confidence. Most leaders, and I say most leaders because I've worked with 93 of the Fortune 100 companies. I've worked in 48 countries across, I don't know how many clients we've had over the last 22 years, a lot. I've worked with CEOs and board levels, and I've coached at board level, and I've spent a long time with a lot of leaders.
Yeah.
And so I can confidently say most leaders don't have all the answers. Most leaders not necessarily don't know what they're doing. That's unfair, but they definitely are constantly seeking more knowledge. But here's the crux of it. This is where it all crumbles and falls apart. They feel the need to show up as if they've got all the answers and feel that they have to know everything. And that if there's any glimmer that they might not know an answer to something, hence where the knee-jerk reactions come in, you should be able to know now, immediately, what do we do? There's any glimmer they don't know, they feel that the spotlight's going to be on them and it might expose a weakness. It's the classic thing, in magic, there's this phrase, don't run if you're not being chased. And the idea is, if you're performing a secret move that nobody's supposed to know about, don't rush it, because the point is nobody knows you're doing it, right?
Yeah.
But if you run and rush it, people will go, wait a minute, why is he running? Why did that bit get really quick all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel self-conscious about it. And that's leadership, and I do feel that for a very long time, we've been guarding an empty safe in leadership as this, apparently secret thing and a secret way to be a good leader. It doesn't exist. There's nothing in there.
Yeah.
Because it's about people.
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you were just saying there about leaders and the whether it's self-imposed or coming from the people around them. This expectation to be almost infallible and all-knowing.
Infallible.
Yeah, I often see this with organisations, and as you say, it means that sometimes you don't get the right decisions and the right outcomes, but also the ripple effects of that, the message it sends to people further down the chain. In terms of what they do with their own vulnerability. And again, it probably perpetuates this idea of imposter syndrome, doesn't it? That actually we can't be comfortable with acknowledging a degree of vulnerability.
Yeah, and it creates a culture by modeling that we just have to pretend and don't tell the truth. Don't say how you really feel.
Yeah.
Just keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is crazy. And, I don't use the phrase lightly. That keep calm and carry on worked brilliantly in the war to hoodwink us all to knuckle down and just keep our chin up. But it kills people now.
Yeah, that's the bottom line, isn't it? Yeah. And people who are very capable doubt themselves and struggle in silence and maybe don't ask for the help that they need. So it causes all kinds of problems,
There's huge responsibility being a leader. I remind people that when we're at school, we are with our teachers. We spend more time with our teachers than we do our own family during
Yeah,
our key formative periods of our life.
yeah,
And during our adult lives, we spend more time with our colleagues and our leaders than we do our own families again.
yeah.
So there's a huge amount of responsibility for leaders to model correctly, and to, I suppose, encourage the people in their charge to do the right thing, to ask questions. To It just goes back to the beginning. Every leader at any point should have the ability to say, just stop, tools down, two questions: what are we doing, and why are we doing it?
Mm,
And third question, when you've answered that, how do we make it better?
mm,
Really, really simple questions. They don't need to be complicated. You don't need to prove anything. Nobody cares. We just want happiness. We just want to earn enough money to go home and feed our kids and have nice holidays, or whatever your
mm,
version of success is.
mm,
Um, and the more honest, I think, I called the subtitle to the book to Leading Change was The Lost Art of Leadership, because I honestly feel that's what it is. It's an art. You can learn it. There's sort of a nuance to it. It's different to a craft, I think. It does feel more like there's a sort of art to leadership. Um, but it does feel like it's a bit lost.
yeah.
Lost our way a bit with it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Fascinating stuff. So tell us about what you're working on at the moment. You mentioned there's a book that you're working on. What are your passion projects at the moment? What can we expect to hear or
Hmm.
see from you in the next 12
I
months?
should stop talking about the book because I realize I'm putting myself under quite a bit of pressure to finish it. Um,
There's a
it
commitment.
just
Yeah.
exactly that, because I'm writing, it just sort of casually comes off the tongue, and as I say it, there's a little voice in my head going, "I wouldn't say that. Just don't tell
Too
anyone."
late. We've got it on record now.
Yes, exactly. So new book, that's very fun. New books are always fun. It's called If, and it's about stories of change, how we navigate life's ifs and what ifs and if onlys. So that probably be released next year. I am spending much more time building this studio as a ceramic artist. So I launch a studio in my first collection in April next year. What I've realized is that working with clay and creating and having that ability to sort of do something very, very different. That if you'd have told me a year ago, 6 months ago, I'd be doing this, I would laughed with you and said, I doubt that very, very much indeed. It was as big a shock to me as it was to everybody else.
Yeah.
But what it's enabled me to do is realize there's so much metaphor that we can learn from, like shaping and molding and the process of what's involved with getting a mug or whatever, and the process that goes through the failures that you have to embrace, and the
Mm.
remodeling. So that, but I intentionally decided, rather than juggling 9 projects at once, which I sort of have always done, that I would just focus on a couple of things. So that is sort of it. I'm still doing the charity work and the other bits and bobs that I do, but and there's a TV show that we're currently developing. I think I can say that. That's all I can say.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We'll watch out for that as well. So
Yeah.
it's
So will
fantastic.
I.
So lots. So fantastic. Lots of things in the pipeline potentially. So we'll definitely look out for
Yeah.
those. Jez, any final words you want to share with the audience? Anything you want to leave them with to ponder on?
Oh gosh, that's a huge responsibility.
I think you're up to it.
I think there's two things to ponder. They're not. I've noticed that a lot of people give a piece of advice or a quote, and in and of itself, it says what it needs to say, and you nod and you agree, and you go, "That's nice." And I've realized that there's greater value in the things that we have to sit with for a bit longer. So I think I'd give two things. The first thing is you have enough, and work out what that means for you. But just look around, and the next time you feel the need to, I don't know, be suckered in by the latest Instagram advert, or you want to buy another thing or whatever. And the reason you're buying it, of course, is to try and fit in, or because you think that by buying it, it will make you like the person that's got it, or that other people will like you because you've got it. Just leave that in the back of your head. You have enough. You are enough exactly as you are. So that's the first thing. And I think because you can kind of ponder on that and reflect on it. And the second thing, I suppose, is just that reiteration that it's never too late to start again. And I'm not advocating that we all give up our jobs and go off and run into a forest and become bakers or woodsmen or florists or whatever. Although if that is what you're thinking, then by all means, maybe that's your journey. But the greatest journeys begin within. And I think we look and rely far too much, not our fault, probably blame the marketing people for that. But we rely far too much externally and on external factors. But the most wonderful journeys, the greatest of all journeys we'll ever get to do, starts with us, inside us, within us. And I'm living proof of that. I have never been happier than I am right now. I've never had so little financial security. I have never had behind me so much death, so much ill health, so much catastrophe, so much fall apart. But I have never been happier, and I have never felt freer either because of embracing those two principles.
Jez Rose, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for inviting me.
This is the business of thinking. Mastery doesn't end here. See you in the next episode.